Tonight I'm going to speak about fake news. And I'm just going to go with this definition: false stories that appear to be news. There's a lot of disagreement about this. People are using fake news to refer to any news that they don't agree with. There's a debate about should satire like The Onion be considered fake news. I'm not really going to go into that. I'll just be focusing on these false stories that, again, really just appear to be news, like this. So this is a famous example. The image on the top, that's the official ABC News logo. And down below, you could see how similar it is to this logo, which is a fake news website that was published out of Colombia. And it was abcnews.com, so .co. So if you just didn't catch that last CO, you think you're looking at abcnews.com. And they're very talented in how they present this material. And as a result, it's not all that surprising that many people can fall for it. A BuzzFeed News study found that 75% of respondents, they gave them a bunch of fake news articles and then real news articles and asked them to discern between the two. And about 83% could correctly identify what the real news articles were, but only 75% mistakenly said that these fake news headlines were also real. So why do we fall for it? And there's several reasons. I'm just going to go through three, and then I'll talk about how a couple steps we could take to avoid falling for these in the future. And a lot of these have to do with just quirks of our brain, cognitive biases that we have. And the first is motivated reasoning. This is a big one that fortunately has been getting a lot of attention as of late. And motivated reasoning is simply the tendency to process information in a way that supports our beliefs. And you can break down motivated reasoning really in two parts. And the first part is selective exposure. And selective exposure is the idea that we look for information or we seek out information that supports our beliefs, and we avoid information that contradicts or contravenes our beliefs. So this is why, if you are a liberal, you're going to gravitate towards MSNBC, and you're going to stay as far away from Fox as possible. If you are a conservative, you're going to want to watch Fox News and stay as far away from MSNBC as possible. And it's not even that we're stuck in these information silos. And even when we're looking at the New York Times or the Washington Post, or you're looking at CNN.com, we even filter there. So we're having exposure to all kinds of information. But what they found is that we just click on the articles that we like, and we just skip over the ones that we don't like. So if you're reading on CNN.com and you see something about the Dow hitting a high under Trump, and you're a Democrat, you're just going to go right on over that to Stormy Daniels, and you'll read that one. And then if you're, of course, a Republican, you're not going to read about Stormy Daniels, but you'll see the Trump headline and say, yeah, and you'll click on that and read that one. And so what research has shown is, not surprising given selective exposure, that we really do gravitate towards ideological websites that align with our political predispositions. And we avoid the ones that we don't like. The other part of motivated reasoning is confirmation and disconfirmation bias. And confirmation bias this is different, because one is, when we talk about selective exposure, it's what are we looking for and what are we avoiding? This is what do we accept. And so when we speak about confirmation bias, we accept information that, again, is aligned with our beliefs, and then we will challenge information that goes against those beliefs. And this is one of my all-time favorite studies. I love this study. This is done by Dan Kahan. And I'm going to take a little bit of time explaining it because I think it is such a wonderful study. So what they did was they gave this table to people, And they asked them to answer the question, what result does this study support? And it's about skin cream. So if you look across the top, you have patients who used this skin cream. 223 of them that used it, the rash got better. 75 of them, it got worse. For people who did not use the skin cream, 107 of them got better, and 21 of them got worse. And what they found out when they gave people this problem, they found that people were pretty bad at it, generally. And the majority got the wrong answer. And so they think what a lot of people did was they maybe just looked at the first part of your two options, right? Where it says people who use the skin cream get better, or people who use the skin cream get worse. And then what they did is they maybe then just looked across that top. Okay, I'm just looking at people who use the skin cream, and then they see the bigger number of people. So, well, 223 got better and only 75 got worse, so it must be number one. Or they may have basically looked kind of in that first column vertically. And here they just maybe read the first option. People who use the skin cream were more likely to get better than those who didn't. And they just look at first column, people who did, well, 223 got better, 107 didn't. And again, they selected the first option, which is incorrect. And what you have to do, of course, is you have to calculate the ratio. And when you do that, you realize that the second option is the correct one. While 75% of the people who did use the cream got better, 84% who didn't got better. And 25% who used it got worse, but only 16% got worse for those who didn't. So that's why the second option was the correct answer. This is where the study got really interesting. So they took people, and they gave them other mathematically inclined problems like this. And so they essentially separated the people who were numerate and then the people who weren't so numerate. And then they just took the people who were numerate. And there were an equal number of Democrats and Republicans in that group. And they basically they didn't give them this exact same problem. They were giving them some other mathematical problems, and then some of the control group got this. But then for these folks that they selected out who did well on these other mathematical problems, they gave them this. They changed it to gun control. And they didn't change any of the numbers, right? The only thing they changed, you could see there, is if the first column is an increase in crime or a decrease in crime. And sure enough, so it's the same sort of thing. And the first one, I found that the intuitive answer, right? Your gut, you're just looking at the numbers and you kind of want to jump at the answer that's the bigger number. And so in the top one, your gut is telling you that gun control increases crime. And so when that happened, you had the situation where gun control is increasing crime. And so Republicans are looking at that and they're saying, I love the sound of that. And they say, that's the right answer. Now, these are Republicans who can do math, but all of a sudden they choose not to. And the Democrats, in this instance, they look at that and they kind of maybe have that initial gut reaction, and then they say, well, wait a second, I don't like that. And then they try to disconfirm it. And so they think about it a little bit more, and then they say, well, wait a second, no, that's not right, because you got to calculate the ratios and that sort of thing. And so here the Democrats do the math and they get the correct answer. Of course, on the one on the bottom, it's the exact opposite. And now all of a sudden here, it's the Democrats who are going with their instinct and not doing the math. And because it's their confirmation bias and they just jump at it. And then it's the Republicans who are saying, well, wait a second, I don't like this. And they take the time to do the math and they get the correct answer. And so when you think about disconfirmation bias and confirmation bias, there's been other studies that illustrate this as well, that Democrats and Republicans both are more likely to believe ideologically aligned fake news articles than non-aligned articles. So again, if you are a Democrat reading about Pope Francis supposedly endorsing Donald Trump, that was during the campaign, you would say, Pope Francis, that's absurd. That can't possibly be true. And then you kind of look into it and say, aha, it's not true. If you're a Republican, you're like, yeah, I did. And then if you're looking at the one on the right, this was like when Trump liked Comey, like this is going back to the campaign, right? So I need to clarify that, I guess. So this is going when they kind of reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. And so if you were a Democrat and that just happened, you're like, what is Comey doing? He's trying to hand the election to Trump and so on. You would see that and say, yeah, well, I'm not surprised. And you'd move on. And a Republican would say, wait a second, no, that can't possibly be true. And so you look for evidence to disconfirm. And so there's like what I call the good news and bad news of fake news, right? It's not necessarily all bad because motivated reasoning will help us avoid and challenge fake news. But that'll only work when it actually, contradicts our politics. So what we need to be careful when we need to think about motivated reasoning and confirmation bias, when the fake news aligns with our political beliefs. So the second thing is the illusion of truth effect. And this just simply means that we have a tendency to believe information to be accurate or correct the more we hear it. And so they've done studies with this as well. Pennycook did a great study on this where they gave a bunch of people some fake news headlines and then some real news headlines. And then they just asked them, is this accurate or, is this fake news? And then at a later time, they gave them more headlines. They mixed them up a little bit, added some new ones, but then they included some of the ones that they had seen before. And they found that it actually, the number of people who thought that this was a fake news article, or it was a fake news article was a real news article doubled just by one extra exposure. And it does compound. If they see it 3 times, it even goes up more. And so here's one example. This was a Black Lives Matter thug protests Trump with a selfie, accidentally shoots himself in the face. And interestingly enough, the illusion of truth effect is strong enough that sometimes it does even override confirmation bias or disconfirmation bias. So you could see on the first exposure that this is something that a Republican is more likely to believe because it, makes people who are aligned with the Democratic Party, doesn't make them look good. And so they're more likely to agree with this. And it's less than 20%, but almost 19% of Trump supporters thought that this was true. On the first go-round, almost 12% of Clinton supporters did. But then the interesting thing is on that second exposure, when they brought these people back and they saw this headline again, the number of Trump supporters who thought it was true doubled. But even what was surprising, and they thought that they would find that, this had been shown in a lot of different other studies, but what was surprising was that even that number went up for Clinton supporters, who would tend to not want to believe this article. And then the last thing here is source misattribution. And this is when we correctly recall a piece of information that we heard, but we misremember the source. So there's a great study that was done they kind of created this just generic campaign attack ad, and they showed a bunch of people, and so they asked people right after they viewed this ad if candidate A was attacking candidate B. They said, how likely would you vote for candidate A? And very few people said they were willing to vote for candidate A. They said, well, this is, I don't believe anything they said in here because this is a candidate's ad, and you don't know if that's true or not, and we think he's really mean to be attacking candidate B. And then several weeks later, they contacted these folks and asked who they were going to vote for, and a lot more people were willing to support candidate A because they remembered hearing bad things about candidate B. They just forgot where they heard those bad things. And then this dovetails into the fact that they've also found that we tend to misremember sources in a way that aligns with our beliefs. This is another great study that they gave several different newspaper articles about a crime. And some of them were from legitimate sources, and some of them were from sources that weren't seen as legitimate, tabloid kind of stuff. And then they just asked people, do you think, and there were two suspects, and they said, who do you think committed the crime, A or B? And then so people chose, and then at a later time, they showed people all of the newspaper clippings, and they said, okay, well, what do you remember what source this came from? Did it come from the legitimate source or, the tabloid source? And if you thought that, well, the way that I like to envision this, I turned it into Clue, because I really liked playing Clue when I was a kid. So you have, like, Colonel Mustard, right? If you were reading all these articles and you thought Colonel Mustard committed the crime, and you had these things, right? And so the first one is from the New York Times, and then the other are from, like, Weekly World News or something like that. When they asked the people who believed Colonel Mustard did it, they thought all of those claims came from the New York Times. And then if you thought Professor Plum did it, it was the exact opposite, right? And they all thought that, claim D, E, and F came from the New York Times. And then they dismissed everybody else, all the Colonel stuff that seems to say Colonel Mustard did it, that's all fake news, that's all false, that's from the tabloids. And so how this applies to fake news, of course, if you read about Hillary Clinton being quote unquote extremely careless, this is with the treatment of her emails and everything during the campaign. You read that if you're Democrat or Republican, you say, okay, you read that in the New York Times. 3 weeks later, if you're a Republican, you think it came from the New York Times. If you're a Democrat, you think it came from the National Enquirer. If you're checking out of the supermarket line and you see Hillary Clinton has brain damage on the National Enquirer, a month later, if you're a Republican, you think that was in the New York Times. And if you're a Democrat, you remember, oh, that was just trash. Right? So if you put all of this together, it can be problematic. If we're repeatedly exposed to information that aligns with our prior beliefs because of selective exposure, the more we see that stuff, the more we're going to perceive that stuff as accurate, and that's due to confirmation bias and the illusion of truth. But then we're going to forget what the source was, and then so we're just going to assume that it originated from a trusted source, even if it didn't. And that, of course, is source misattribution. And a great example of this would be the number of people allegedly who were voting illegally in the 2016 presidential campaign. So the guy who started this was Greg Phillips. He was a founder of this organization called Vote Stand. And on November 13th, soon after the election, he posted this on Twitter. We have verified more than 3 million votes cast by non-citizens. So now it's out on social media. Then it was picked up by InfoWars, which is a conspiracy website, Alex Jones. And he's just repeating this claim by Greg Phillips. And then people started retweeting that story from InfoWars, a link to the website. And then President Trump tweeted it on November 27th. And then the result of this is this. I'm going to play a short video clip here. And just watch this and think about things like confirmation bias and illusion of truth effect and source misattribution. Need volume, I think.
Is a privilege in this country, and you need to be legal, not like California where 3 million illegals voted.
Let's talk about that.
I'm glad I brought that up, Allison.
Me too, Paula. So where are you getting your information?
From the media. Where else
Which
would we
media?
get? Some of it was CNN, I believe.
CNN said that 3 million illegal people voted
Well,
in
it was coming
California?
all across the media. All across. Well, CNN didn't do it, then they were being smart this time.
Do you think that 3 million illegal people
I
voted?
believe in California that there were illegals that voted.
How many?
I don't. To tell you the truth, nobody really knows that number.
But do you think 3 dozen or do you think 3 million?
I think there was a good amount because the president told people that they could vote, and it happened in Nashua. We caught some people that they went into Nashua and they said, the president said I can vote. I'm here illegally.
Did you hear President Obama say that illegal people could vote?
Yes,
Yes,
I did.
I
heard
heard
it.
it this morning.
Yes, I did hear it.
Tell me, where?
On you can find it. Google it. You can find it on Facebook.
All right, hold on. I don't want to waste any more time, but anyway, I see where it came from, and it's Fox Business Network deceptively edited a clip of Barack Obama to argue that the president encouraged illegal immigrants to vote when in fact he had said nothing of the sort when you go back to the transcript. You, as you sit here today, think that millions of illegal people voted in this country. You believe that there was widespread voting abuse.
I think there was in some states.
In the millions of people.
California allows it.
They do not allow illegal. You mean voter fraud? California allows.
I believe there is voter fraud in this country. Voting is.
So you can see, she has seen this. Well, where did you hear this? And she said, well, it's all over, right? So that's obviously she's a Trump supporter. So she's going to have confirmation bias. So she's going to be visiting certain websites that are going to be carrying this kind of information. And then she says, well, it's all over the media. And so that's the illusion of truth effect. She's seeing it over and over and over and over again. So she's going to, well, if all of these people are reporting it, this must be true. And then when she asked, well, where did you hear this? She said, well, I think CNN. And I said, no, we didn't report that. So there's source misattribution. So all of these things kind of come together in that clip. So what can we do to prevent this? So I have 5 things that I'll just run through. And the first is just be skeptical about, not cynical, but just skeptical. And this is, I don't know how many of you have seen this. This is called the cognitive reflection test. I'm sorry I'm giving you so much math tonight. But you can take a swing. Hey, thank you. So a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Anyone want to go out on a limb? 5 cents, yes. Most people say 10. That's the intuitive answer, like your gut instinct, because you're looking at $1.10 and 10, and you're like, oh, there's 10 cents difference between the two. But the correct answer is 5 cents. The next question, there's only 3 of these. In a lake, there's a patch of lily pads. Every day, the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days for the patch to cover the entire lake, how long would it take for the patch to cover half the lake? Yes. This is a smart crowd. Well, most people say 24, right? Because you see 48 and you're thinking half, and you're like, well, half of 48 is 24, but it's 47. And then the last one, if it takes 5 machines, 5 minutes to make 5 widgets, how long would it take 100 machines to make 100 widgets? 5 minutes, right? Most people say 100, because you see 100, 100, 100, and you just, you want to jump at that, but it's 5 minutes. And Pennycook gave these 3 questions to people in this study and found out that the people who performed better on those questions were less likely, and then they presented them with articles and said, is this true or fake? And they found that people who just take the time to think a little bit and don't have that instant intuitive reaction to jump at something are far less likely to believe in fake news stories. The second thing we need to do is check our biases and realize that we all have them. that none of us are immune to these things. You might have that crazy aunt or uncle or cousin or whatever on Facebook that you just don't want to hear about, especially during election time, and so you might want to just unfriend them, or you look at your Twitter feed and you don't really have a lot of people from the other side of the political aisle. And we have to understand that we are cultivating our own little echo chamber or information silo. And also that we're going to want to accept information when it aligns with our belief, and we're going to want to dismiss it when it doesn't. And so we can really help ourselves with this by really diversifying our media diet. And by doing that, you've already dealt with selective exposure. You're going to be exposed to stuff. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be open to it. It's probably going to make smoke come out of your ears. However, what they have found is, as far as fake news stuff, that there was a great study by Rawless that found there is a tipping point that if you believe A, and you just keep seeing story after story saying not A, not A, not A, not A, your disconfirmation bias wears down. And eventually, people start to get it and start to accept facts. But we're never going to have that opportunity, however, if we don't expose ourselves to different pieces of information. So we should always be open to testing our ideas. To avoid the illusion of truth effect and source misattribution, we just have to get into the habit of asking ourselves, what's the source of this? So if you're having a conversation with someone and you're just saying things, this happens to me all the time, where I'm like, well, this, and I'm like, I don't remember where I read it, but I think I read, and I got to try to break out of that habit and just do a Google search and look for, try to find that source. So it's not just, it wasn't something that your cousin tweeted or something on a fake news website, that you can really go back and double check that source. Third, pretty straightforward, check for corroboration. A legitimate story is more likely to be reported across the major media news outlets. And so if you find it in one place, look and see if it's the other places. And then checking with the experts. This one is pretty obvious, and I think people are getting much better at this. Fact check, Snopes, PolitiFact. This was a famous one that went around that got a lot of people who weren't crazy about Trump, and they fell for this one. But all you have to do is you go to, this is from factcheck.org, but it's on all of them, and it was a false meme. He never said that. They went through and they went back to all those People magazines and didn't find it. They do great work. And then finally, read laterally. So this is what all great fact checkers do. If you pull this up, this was another fake news article that was circulating. The guy who was running this website was paying for his college tuition by doing this. He was just posting a lot of fake news and making a lot of money, and it paid his way through school, or paid off his college debt. So what fact checkers will do is they'll open up a website, and then they immediately open up another tab. And then they just keep going back and forth, and trying to verify things. So always first investigate the organization. Investigate the URL. This is the one that I was talking about earlier in the presentation with the .com CO. Just search it, and you'll find that it was a fake news site. Also check out the author. This is a good one. So this is, Obama banned the Pledge of Allegiance. So this guy, the author was Jimmy Rustling. And if you search the internet for what Jimmy Rustling is, that was his name. So just a quick search and you'll find out all interesting kind of things. Investigate the sources. This was one that Trump had retweeted. And you can see there the source says Crime Statistics Bureau, San Francisco. No such thing exists. And in fact, the numbers that are highlighted there that I put in the red box, that in reality, according to the FBI statistics, it was the exact opposite. So the number of whites killed by whites was actually 81%. The number of whites killed by blacks was actually 16%. And when they tracked down this website, it was some guy in Europe somewhere, and it was from a white supremacist website that on the website said we should have listened to the little Austrian guy with the funny mustache. So that's where this came from, and then you have this being retweeted. And then he went on Bill O'Reilly and he said, my sources are good. But yeah. This one was interesting too. So a lot of times they'll provide links. Click on the link, see where it goes. A lot of times it doesn't go to anything that's related. And then sometimes it will just be interpreted incorrectly. And so this was something that, this was a story that Fox News was running. And the headline is true. Police officer deaths on duty have jumped nearly 20% at this time in 2017. But then, like, the whole article, you could see there, they had the video box come up, and it was footage of this police officer who was ambushed and shot. And then it had, like, scrolling pictures of all of these officers who have been shot in the line of duty. And that's how the article started. But when you click on the link for the source they were using, the source is legitimate. It's the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. These numbers are a little bit different because this goes from January to October, and when that story was published, it was from January to July, I think. But it was basically the same. When you clicked on this and you looked, you saw that the whole narrative of that article was totally misleading. Because I don't know if you can read it, but the firearms-related casualties among police actually declined 21%. What had gone up were these other causes. And those other causes were things like plane crashes, fires, drowning, things of that nature, that other things that were happening to the officers in the line of duty. The whole narrative and spin of the article was that there were these violent attacks on police officers. And it just wasn't true. Another great thing you can do anytime you see images is just do a quick image search. These are really easy to do online. And this is an example. You can see the nameplate there. It's been altered. They basically said this guy was a Muslim judge and he was imposing Sharia law somewhere in California or something like that. It was totally inaccurate. This is a picture, of course, that was doctored of President Bush. The real one is on the left and the fake one is on the right. This one's a famous one. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. Sarah Palin in the bathing suit. This one is also fake. I thought it was photoshopped, but it's actually like an actor who dresses up and plays Trump, and he looks really good. And all you have to do, you can do this through Google Images, you can do it through TinEye. You just literally click on the picture and drag it into the search bar, and it will search the internet for that image, and then it will give you all the websites where those images show up. And so if you, just to go back to this, if you were to do it with this image, you would see this was a picture taken from like one of the local newspapers or CNN or something like that. And you'll see that exact picture will come up, but you'll see that the nameplate had the judge's real name on it. Then we're getting into some new territory here. So this is Gal Gadot, and she's better known as Wonder Woman. I don't know if you heard about this, but on the left side, this is an adult film star actress, and they took Gal Gadot's head and put it on this body, and it moves. It's like a moving picture. This is Nick Cage on Amy Adams' body. It's not just pictures, but also these are called deepfakes. I'll just play a brief clip of this.
I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But I spent oh so many nights just thinking how you did me wrong. But I grew strong, and I learned how to get along. And now you're back from outer space. You just walked in and saw me here with that same look upon my face. I should... Okay.
So you can imagine what could be done with that technology, right? It's amazing technology, but boy, we're going to have to be really skeptical now when we see videos. And now it's even tapes. You think about all this stuff. If there are these tapes, for Cohen, when they raided Cohen's office, and maybe he recorded things, or you think back to Watergate. Well, you have tapes, and how can you deny tapes? That's not going to be good enough anymore. And so this is Adobe Project Voco, and I'll play a real brief clip of this as well. So they took a line of text, and it was this person saying, so I went home, and I kissed my wife, and I kissed my dogs, something like that. And so then they just start taking out words and switching words and adding words. And the result is pretty remarkable.
Just type the word dogs here. And
I kissed my wife and my dogs.
Whoa! So he took out a word there.
Wait, here's more. We can actually type something that's not here. So I heard that actually on that day, Michael actually kissed our Jordan. So
Sorry?
To recover the truth, let's do it. So let's remove the word my here.
Your secret's out, Jordan.
And just type the word Jordan.
Ooh.
And here we go.
And I kissed Jordan and my dogs.
Well,
you a witch. You a demon.
oh yeah, I have magic. And the last magic I'm gonna show you guys is we're not just going to do with words. We can actually type small phrases. So let's say, okay, so we remove those words and we do 3 times.
Oh.
And play back.
And I kissed Jordan 3 times.
So all they need is about 20 minutes of you speaking, and they can make you say anything. So you can imagine candidates on the campaign trail, they've got plenty of recorded material, and they can make that voice say anything. And so you can only imagine how that can be misused in the future. So everyone has a responsibility here, obviously, media organizations, politicians, you would hope, but we do as well. And so I would just encourage you to, again, be skeptical, check your biases, check for corroboration, check with the experts, and whenever you can, read laterally. So thank you for your time and attention, and here are my sources. If you want to get any of these studies that I referenced, you can come up and grab these. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Redmond. Are you open for questions?
Sure.
All right, audience, if you have any questions you would like to address to our speaker tonight, I'll come up to you with the mic. Are you our first person? All right.
I could be.
You're close. I'll let you do that.
So when someone obviously lies in print or on the radio or on television, what is the recourse? I assume these people cannot be put in jail. They can be sued? Is that about it?
There's very little recourse. You know, you can be sued for libel, but the standard is very, very high. So most folks don't even bother. You know, for public figures, it's incredibly high. There's like an actual malice, you know, which a lot of this would seemingly fall under. But a lot of these sites, they're up and then they're gone, and you know, and then it's other people circulating it. So as far as legal stuff, I don't really. I'm not a lawyer, but I really don't think there's that much that can be done, and it's just relying on the people who are, you know, especially like Facebook is trying to be better about this, and Twitter and things of that nature, allowing people to, you know, click on this and say, I don't think this is legitimate, but that's why I think it's just so important that we be able to have the ability to kind of weed out this stuff for ourselves.
You listed 3 fact-check sources. One of them was factcheck.org. I didn't get the other 2.
Oh,
what were they?
The other is Snopes, SNOPES, and then the other is PolitiFact, and that is, I'm not sure if that's .com or .org, but I think it's .org. Yeah, sorry.
Any other questions? Oh.
Great presentation. Question on spin. These are facts, you can check them, but often there's so much spin out there on facts that are out there. Let's say somebody wants to connect autism with vaccines, so the number of cases goes from 1 to 2, so they say it doubled from vaccines. And so you touched on it a little bit, but in the big scheme with so many different moving parts, so many narratives, and really just the challenge of cutting through the context and what it means, how can we take what we find and take it to the next level of what does this mean in the context as well? How do we avoid the spin doctors or cut through that?
Yeah, great question. That's tough. Yeah, the problem is spin can, you run into a lot of the same things. If it's somebody on your side spinning, we tend to believe it. You know, the good news is if somebody else is spinning on the other side, we're pretty suspicious about that. So we just really have to practice on really being most skeptical when it's our own side speaking to us, and that of course is the real challenge. I think the press can do a better job as well at when people are spinning things to try to bring them back to some of the facts and that sort of thing. As you said, if someone says, well, this doubled, and coming back with, well, it only went from 1 case to 2 cases, that sort of thing. And because it's hard for people to, I mean, some people are very good at spinning things, and there's just a ton of examples of that, how they use the word average and in really misleading ways. And we hear average and we think one thing and they're using it, you know, in another way. It's really hard to keep up. And so I think it's just cultivating the habit of being skeptical and hoping that people in positions of, you know, if you have another elected official in a debate, that they hold that other person accountable, or journalists hold that person accountable. I mean, that's the best we can ask for. And they don't often do a very good job at that, which is why I think it's so important that we learn some of these skills. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I'm always pushing this on my students to try to get them in that habit of doing this sort of thing, because a lot of times you feel like you're alone. But there are a lot of great sources out there, but they can only do so much, you know. So a lot of times I'll go to these sites and they don't have that on there yet. But I wish I could give you a better answer. than that. But
I remember when I was in high school, I wrote a paper on communism, and I came across the quote, "Tell a lie, make it big, repeat it often, and the majority of people will believe you." That never worked on my mom. And so I think in that regard, you really have to know your source. So my sister and I developed lie by telling the truth. So for instance, I asked my friend, does she color her hair? She says no. Her hairdresser does. So I can go around and tell everybody, Kathy says she doesn't color her hair, and that's the truth. She doesn't, somebody else does. So I'm just saying that you need to know your source, and you need to know how they lie. And I think pretty much with Trump, we know how he lies. And he's into that one, tell a lie, make it big, repeat it often, and the majority of people will believe you. But the problem with him is that he starts to believe it also. And I think that's our biggest danger right now, is he doesn't really know what the truth is about even his own things.
Your story reminds me of in the when the Children's March in Birmingham in '63, and there was one of the young girls. She wanted to go march, and her mom, before she was going to school that day, her mom said, "I don't want you going down there and marching," and she just said, "I hear you," and then she left. And then they interviewed her later. She said, "I didn't lie to my mom. I said I hear you." And yeah, it's a good point.
The question in one case I'm thinking of, is what is really the lie? There's a lie out that Jesse Owens was discriminated against because Adolf Hitler wouldn't shake his hand. That flat out isn't true. The reason Hitler didn't shake his hand is because he wasn't shaking hands with any of the Olympic winners at that time. And in fact, black athletes that went from the U.S. to Nazi Germany during the Olympics were treated better in Germany than they were here. Now, the policy was that during the Olympics, the Nazis took down all anti-Semitic signs, and the orders came from Berlin that all people from all countries, no matter what race or religion, were be treated with respect. Now, what's dishonest? The statement that Hitler was discriminating against Jesse Owens was basically untrue. But the fact of the matter is that the Nazis were deliberately, during the Olympics, trying to prevent a false image of what Nazi Germany was like, because it was racist, and they were trying to prevent a more open-minded image of it. So in a certain sense, the image that you got, if you went to Germany during the Olympics, was not really what that Germany was really like. So that, in a sense itself, was dishonest.
Right, yeah, they did try to do away with all evidence of anti-Semitism. They didn't want any of the international community coming down on them. So they were trying to, really whitewash the whole thing.
Gary? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm a frequent user of Snopes or FactCheck to comment on some of the social media posts that my conservative family may post. What do you do if you can't find any information to counter? Like, right after the Parkland shooting, one of my conservative relatives shared that, all of these mass shootings have been done by people who recently came off of SSRI medications, and they were in withdrawal. And so I looked for information to support or refute it, and I could find nothing. So I didn't really start to argue with him because I couldn't support it anywhere. But neither could he, but I didn't even start the dialogue at that point. What would you recommend when something isn't on Snopes yet, or is, such a small conspiracy or whatever that I usually try to offer evidence to contradict or help people understand better that it, whatever they saw is misleading. But sometimes that information can't be found.
Yeah, it's a great point. What I would do is I would just ask them where they got their information from. So if you can't find anything, just say, well, how do you know that? And it goes back to that question of knowing our sources, and then see what they offer, and then maybe if they send a link, then you can go to that link, and then you can maybe start to deconstruct that. What other stuff is on this website? What kind of website is this? Investigate the URL, that sort of thing, and then maybe you can come back with some information. Well, I'm not sure this website's really legitimate. Look at this sort of thing, and I kind of looked into this URL, and this is what it's telling me, or if they can't tell you where they got it from, then well, then how do you know that? And then that might give them pause. That's what I would suggest. And these websites do have an option, and they actually encourage you to, if there's something that's not on there, to send it to them and ask them if they can investigate. And so that sometimes there might be some turnaround there, but that is another option. But I would just start with asking them, how do they know?
A few more.
Hello. So you presented that chart that had a bunch of media sources. You had some in the middle, and then some that were on the left and some that were on the right. Could you go back to that? Okay. So I've seen versions of this chart before, and I've seen some that I think are better and some that are worse. But I guess what I think is sort of missing in a chart like this is, I think we can all agree that like MSNBC is leaning to the left and Fox News is leaning to the right. But I think MSNBC, while not, no one should just rely solely on MSNBC, it is left-leaning opinion mostly based on fact. And I would say that Fox News is right-leaning opinion, maybe overall, just in their everyday reporting, mostly based on fact, but they propagate, I would say, a lot more falsehoods. And is that a distinction that you think is worth making? Like, just because something is on the left doesn't, it could be opinion, but it's opinion based on fact versus opinion based on falsehood. And do you see an issue with like equating MSNBC and Fox News in that way?
Yeah. I mean, yes, it does depend on what show you're speaking about. If there are differences, what's on Fox News at 5 or 6 o'clock as opposed to what's on at 9, and so I think that's a big distinction, and I do think, but again, I'm always trying to check I am to the left of the political spectrum, so I'm always trying to be very cautious about this sort of thing, and sometimes I don't know. I would think overall I would tend to agree with you. Sometimes, though, Rachel Maddow can sometimes get pretty conspiratorial. Lawrence O'Donnell can from time to time. I don't think they're on the level of a Sean Hannity. So I don't think there's an equivalency there. But, I do think, what we do need to distinguish between what hour are we speaking about, and it's the same. A lot of folks think newspapers are biased because they read something on the editorial page, and those are supposed to be opinionated, and so those nighttime talk shows are supposed to be opinionated, and it goes back to the question about spin. They're definitely portrayed in a particular perspective. So I do think, it depends on, I would agree with you overall, but I always I tend to find myself being more vigilant towards where I lean, trying to, maybe just be a little bit too cautious. But I think you should consider that, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, final chance. Oh, okay, coming up.
So the voice synthetic aspect is really freaky. Especially as somebody who stands in front of a classroom and knows that they're recording my lectures for definitely more than 20 minutes at a time. I've read when I submit scientific papers things about the validity of images that you're submitting, figures, and that they'll put them through software that will detect whether you've changed your image in any way to prevent scientific fraud. And so that's something that's in place for publishing of scientific data. I wonder if you've heard about anything that would help to validate the authenticity of audio.
Yeah, well, Adobe, who's working on that, they said I don't know if they've already got it done or they're working on it, but they're saying that somehow they would be able to essentially like watermark what was real audio. I don't know how, but there are people in the works. There are things in the works. Enough people were freaked out by this that they're saying, okay, well, we need to develop some kind of program to counter that. And it's always that's the game, right? There's some new technology and then people start manipulating it, and then so somebody has to come up with the technology to detect that it was fraudulent. The problem is, though, that a lot of people more people tend to see the fraudulent thing than the fact checking. And so even if you do have that sort of thing out there, it's going to take a while for people to get comfortable with that and conversant with it. And I think that's starting to happen with fact checking, but then if, again, like people say, well, I don't believe the fact checking if it doesn't align with your ideology. And so that's problematic. And so if there's a video and it looks exactly like somebody is saying something, and you tell that person, well, no, this is fake, and look here, this is, some people say, well, how do you know that one's not the fake one, and this one's the real one? And that's pretty tough to deal with. So it's going to be really challenging, because just seeing someone speak, and they can do it where they match up your lips, that's like merging the Nicolas Cage thing with this audio. You can have an entire speech where you're just manipulating what a president is saying. It's going to be...
Have you ever seen bad lip reading?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's scary because, I don't know if you guys remember, but it was like someone in Pakistan thought there was something like Israel was like, we're going to nuke Pakistan or something, and then somebody in Pakistan, the Pakistani government really thought it was real. And they responded on Twitter, if you do, we'll blow you up. And then it was like, oh, this is fake. And they're like, oh, okay. This is, if people are falling for this stuff, and it's only going to get worse, which puts more onus on us to be extra vigilant. It's going to be a challenge. Yeah, I didn't even think about that with teaching, so thanks. I don't have to worry about it. It's a really good point.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment added to that. Months after the Hollywood Access tape came out, there was that bit about Trump saying, well, how do you know that's my voice? And I just wondered if he was even aware of that kind of technology at that time, to contradict that.
I don't think so, but I wonder. Because at first he said he apologized.
Right.
And then later he said, no, that wasn't me.
Right.
Probably because I wonder, but that's a great point, because now he could say, well, they've got this thing and they changed my voice. It's real easy. And that's a great example of what could ultimately happen once this becomes more widespread.
Yeah. Operative word is chilling. We have another question here.
Not a question. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and the students at Williamsville East are very fortunate to have you as a teacher.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much for saying that. He's not my dad. Thank you very much.
And thank everyone for coming out tonight to hear Dr. Redmond speak. And as usual with lectures, if anyone wants to continue the dialogue, we oftentimes meet at the Anchor Bar in the neighborhood on Maple and Sweet Home. So if you're so inclined and a bit thirsty, you might want to join the group that's going out there. So thank you again for coming out. We hope to see you at future events. Look at our website again if you're looking to find out what those dates are and what the offerings are. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell to be notified about new videos. You can follow us on social media, and if you really love what we do, consider supporting us with a donation. Links to all that good stuff is in the description below.